Okay, guys, welcome to this special presentation, and it's all about how to create new houses in gardens. Now, we think doing new housing gardens is a great method for creating significant wealth at minimal risk and minimal outlay. So what we're going to do, I'm going to burst a few myths. We're going to look at some Q&A, common misapprehensions, and concerns that could be raised about doing houses and gardens. And also, I'm going to show you lots and lots of real examples of projects that we've done. Okay, so here we go. Okay, let's look at the questions first, because there are lots of questions, but there are also very good answers to all of these. Okay, let's go through these one by one. The obvious first one is, why on earth would you wish to create a house in a garden? What is this guy on about? One of the answers, looking at the commercial aspect, is because it creates massive uplift in value, effectively making money out of thin air. Some of these cases do seem almost too good to be true. And you'll see, I say, lots and lots of real world examples that I've been involved in, and I've created these, cumulative, making millions and millions of pounds for our clients. Secondly, because you don't even need to develop it or build it. We're talking about planning uplift. We're talking about the residual land value uplift, which can be hundreds of thousands of pounds. If you're not heavily involved in the development community, residual land value simply means what the land is worth with the planning if the building was built out, okay? Hence the word residual. When you do the calculation, residual basically means what's left over, and that's how you crunch the calculation. It is what's left over after you've done the calculation. So in development, you have what they call GDV, the gross development value. How much would that scheme be worth if you try to sell it in the open market? And obviously off that GDV, which is the headline figure, you have to deduct how much it would cost to build. You have to deduct all the other costs, such as planning and your architect and all the other consultants. That all comes off this headline number. You also have to deduct other costs. For example, lawyers, if you're selling the scheme, CDM, building control, the actual planning departments, fees and costs. All these things come off that headline value. You also need to deduct profitability. If you're developing or you flip to somebody else who's going to develop, they need to make a profit. You'd hope they're going to make at least 20% profits, maybe 25 plus to hedge their bets and give them a margin to make sure they make 20%. They're also carrying finance. The costs of that finance all has to come off this headline GDV figure. And once you've properly accounted for all that, you're left with the residual land value, what that land legitimately is worth. Now, of course, the problem in the development community, you often have to come up with that figure first, okay, because you're offering for land or you're making an option for land. So what you have to do is make sure you get your sums right, because the thing that should be at the end of the equation is what you're pitching at. And if you get that wrong, you could come a cropper, okay? Especially with build costs being so high these days. So do listen up, guys. Build costs are very high. They're horrendous. Construction price inflation over the last 2 years has been really, really high. In the olden days, by which I mean the 80s, and leading up to that and slightly after that, people used to say, okay, listen, this is what people used to say, a third, a third, a third. That mantra was received wisdom, okay? So what does that mean? People thought a third for the land, a third for the build, and a third for the gross profits to make sure you make 20–25% net profit. That is wrong now. So commonly, build costs these days can be 40% of GDV. So 40% of GDV, the thing that has to give is the residual land value. So instead of being 33% of GDV, it's much safer to work between 25 to 30% of GDV. It depends which part of the country you're in as well. So obviously in high worth areas, the land will be a higher proportion because the build cost will be a lower proportion of GDV usually. Okay, so the land value, the uplift in land value will be less proportionally than it may have been in the past. But here's the rub, guys, it's still massive. Provided in the right area, especially in London or the southeast, the uplift in residual land value is massive. We're talking about huge sums. Okay, so you don't need to develop it or build it. Just the residual land value uplift alone can be hundreds of thousands of pounds. And we'll see this in some of the examples later. Reason number 3, why would you wish to create a house and a garden? Because you can make the money for yourself and your family. If you own that house and it's your existing garden, your own surplus garden space, make that money for yourself. I tell people they've almost got an obligation to do right by themselves and do right by their family. You should be the one cashing in, rather than some other guy further down the line in 8 years or 5 years or 20 years. Do not allow somebody else to cash in. Cash in yourself. Your garden has value, huge value. Also, the last reason in this section, because there is a massive shortage of housing in England. So you are meeting a need and you are creating a home for a family or for several families if you're doing several houses in your garden. Okay, this is a worthwhile cause. It's an honourable cause. Don't feel guilty just because your neighbour or somebody in your street might try and make you feel guilty. You are doing something righteous and you're doing something good. You're doing something good for mankind, okay? You're doing something good for those families who want to live in those houses that you're able to create. Okay, second question. Won't it affect the value of the original house as you're reducing its garden? Now, most of the plots we work with do have large gardens with excess, what I call excess garden land beyond what is necessary. Now, clearly, some people may disagree with me, but I think the delivery of housing is important. Some people might disagree with the expression excess garden land. They say, what do you mean by excess? I mean comfortably beyond what you need for amenity for that existing host dwelling. Okay, excess garden land. And most of these gardens can easily spare the difference. Okay, you can create gardens. The retained garden for the existing house can still be nice and generous, and the garden you're creating for the new house can also be ample for the requirements in terms of that family's amenity space. Secondly, the majority of people don't even want a huge garden these days. They don't. They really don't. I'm not saying they quite need to lock up and leave, but they don't want a huge garden. Do they have time to get a ride-on mower and do that every Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon? Do they grow their own fruit and vegetables like in the Second World War? I very much doubt it. At least most people don't. Most people don't want a huge garden. And lastly, on this page, even if it does reduce the value of the original house, it will be modest in comparison to the value that you are creating. Okay, I've got an example there. For example, it may knock 20 grand off the value of the house, but creates at least £150,000 in added value. More questions. Isn't it bad for the environment? Okay, remember there's a massive shortage of housing in England. I reckon 7 million. We need to be building 7 million houses and flats. Many people would agree with me. We're at least 4 million behind already, and we're still not building enough to keep up with demand. We're falling even further behind. So that's 4 million, plus at least another 3 million for all the people who are going to come to England over the next 10 or 20 years. 7 million, like I say, you're doing an honourable thing. Those houses, unless we're going to have unacceptable living conditions in this country, which you do have a few of already, in fact, many of, unless we're going to have unacceptable living conditions, we need to build those houses. Otherwise, there'll be overcrowding. We can't have families living and sharing houses beyond what is reasonable. So that house for that family needs to be built somewhere. And if not here, then it probably will be on a greenfield site out in the countryside. Secondly, also by definition, that new house will be next to your house. So it will be in a built-up area, which is more sustainable, because your house is more likely to be closer to shops and bus routes and railway stations and other facilities. Thirdly, that new house can be designed to be of high quality, like our examples, with good spaces and gardens and lights and windows and bifold doors, offering a high quality of life. And again, with ample space retained for the existing house. Lastly, under this question, your scheme can be designed with features such as additional tree and shrub planting and the creation of new habitats with features such as green roofs and green walls, even things like bat boxes, bird boxes, bee bricks, all these things, the idea of biodiversity net gain. In the past, planners and developers, well, good developers, were concerned about avoiding or minimizing harm to the environment. These days, that's all flipped on its head. And the premise is, let's try and make everything better than it is now. So better than it is now. Biodiversity net gain. Things can be made better. Even a farmer's field is an ecological wasteland with fertilizers. That's why there's so much emphasis on woodland and hedgerows in the countryside. Even your lawn or patio, even a lawn is not great habitat. Okay, things can be made better. You can have your cake and eat it too. In other words, you can develop and make things better. Okay, lastly, surely the planners won't approve it. I mean, what are you doing? How can you possibly put a house in a garden? The planners will go ballistic. They can't support that, can they? Why would they approve a house in a garden? Well, excuse me, we've already done over 20 of these. They've all been approved. You do need to be mindful to avoid things such as overlooking, overbearing bulk. That's simply by being too high and too big and too close to other people. Look at the pattern of development as well. And also you need to abide by space standards, okay? So space standards, the size of the new dwelling, that is a given, guys. If you try and bring forward a planning application that's not big enough in terms of the space of the house and the rooms, you'll get a refusal, and you deserve to get a refusal. It's a given. You must abide by the space standards. Lastly, do remember the planners, they also care, just like I do. The planners care about the wider policy issues, and that does include the acute and unacceptable shortage of housing in England. They actually want more houses. Okay, so the following pages will show you some of our projects where we have successfully created new build houses in gardens. They do all have planning approval, and many of them have now been built or are being built. So if you or any of your business associates or friends or family have a similar opportunity, then do contact us. Even the smallest examples can create £100,000 at minimal cost and minimal risk. Okay, 100,000. So even a relatively normal or modest house in the southeast is typically worth, say, 300, 375 £375,000. So the land value on a £375,000 house, which is modest, will be 100 grand uplift just for the land. Obviously, the larger ones that I'm going to show you create many hundreds of thousands of pounds, and in some cases over £1 million. This is just in residual land value uplift alone. You don't even need to build anything if you don't wish. Okay, here's some examples. I'm going to show you lots of examples. I'll tell you a little bit about them, and I'll tell you why they were acceptable to the planners. Okay, so Marvel's Lane. This is in London. It speaks for itself. The garden was all associated with the house. If you look at the bottom left-hand side image, the garden was all part of the house to the bottom left. You see it in the dark grey there. A little conservatory sticking out. I hope you can notice the shape of that conservatory. So this was all part of their garden. But this site has the advantage of being a corner plot. Corner plots are great, guys. Look out for corner plots. So you see what we've done, we put the house as far away as possible from the existing house. It's actually next to the other house down the side street. And what we've done, we've made it fit in. So you can see on the right-hand side of the upper image, it's almost perfectly aligned with the existing house on the adjacent site. The form and height, etc., is pretty much the same. And then there's a smaller setback bit, as you can see on the left-hand side of the main image. And you can also see how the garden works and the parking works. So that was obviously acceptable to the Lewisham planners. It ticks the boxes. You create the house while avoiding harm on others. And of course, importantly, that house on the right-hand side, the existing brick house that you can see in the top image, that didn't have any habitable room windows facing our site. So it didn't have any living room windows or bedroom windows. It's just the side, the blank gable. What you're looking for is blank gable ends or ones with just little toilet and ensuite windows in the side flanking elevations. You don't want to have big windows facing your site. Okay, secondly, Rothley Close. Now, this is a very high quality example. It actually won us the Ashford Excellence Awards. So it's down in Ashford. It's actually in Tenterden, which is within the Ashford Borough. And you can see the good quality house. And if you look at the analytical graphic on the bottom right-hand side, you can see why it works. Do read those things, guys. These things are important. So let's go round from the bottom left. You can see the sun path as well, actually. That's all noted on there. These things are all important. So bottom left, near the bottom there with number 52, establish an appropriate gable end relationship with number 52. So they've got a blank end facing us. We also have a blank end facing them. Top left, the house adjacent called Clifton House. Avoid overlooking. So do avoid overlooking of other people's houses and avoid overlooking of other people's gardens. It's a no-brainer, as they say. Flipping round to the top side there, do establish a positive street frontage. This is in your interest as well, of course. It's what the estate agents called curb appeal. You want your building to look nice from the street. And obviously that's a place where you can focus your windows. You can look out over the streets without bothering any of the neighbours. Keeping going round a clockwise direction, do retain the trees, what I've called a strong Arcadian frontage. You don't want to go winding people up for the sake of it. You're going to shoot yourself in the foot. Do retain the good things on the site. Keep the neighbours happy as far as possible. And also do respect the trees as well. Do avoid damaging them, have tree protection areas, etc., and tree protection fences. Okay, this is in Sutton Valence, which is a very pretty rural village outside Maidstone. You can see the top left image, the thing in dark grey was the host dwelling. Had a very, very big garden, as you can see. So our new build, you can see in the white and black, is to the left in the plan image there in the top left-hand corner. So there we went for a very, very high quality house, very much focused towards the streets and also importantly towards its garden. So even the new house gets a beautiful garden to the south, with lots of balconies opening up and bifold doors, etc., opening up to that rear garden. So you can see the bottom right-hand image is actually bigger than the existing house as well, really. So really top quality family home with a lovely south-facing garden. Now, one thing that our client did on this, they didn't have to really, but it all helps as part of the planning offer, is they retained part of it, which is going to be planted up as woodland in perpetuity with a legal agreement. So this just replicates their immediate garden plot. Then the bit beyond, like a squarish part beyond both those gardens, will be a woodland in perpetuity under the planning and protected with a legal agreement. One of the reasons for that is these guys live in the house, the little white house in the dark grey. They're selling up, but they didn't want the idea of a developer building over everything with a little estate of, say, 8 or 12 normal houses. They wanted to protect that land in perpetuity. It was their decision. Of course, the planners also welcomed that, like I say, as part of the measures put forward at planning. Okay, it's just slightly more urban, but a very, very nice area in Tunbridge Wells. So St. John's part of Tunbridge Wells. If you look at the plan, you can see those squarish houses towards the right-hand side of the plan in the lower left-hand image. Nice, big, detached executive houses, obviously worth a fortune, all of those. This was created by 3 neighbours getting together and saying, hey guys, our gardens are massive. If we'll chip in a little bit of our garden, we can make a huge amount of money. So this is acceptable. The gardens retained for those existing houses are still massive. Got the new build in, that gets its own massive garden. It's got access. You can see from the top hand side, so you'd have to squeeze a driveway between those houses. And also you can see we've gone out of our way to keep it, really, it's designed like a bungalow. It is actually in reality a 2-story house, a very, very large 2-story house. But you can see one of the main premises, like I was saying earlier, is to avoid overlooking other people's houses and avoid overlooking other people's gardens. That's always a given, trying to avoid overlooking other people. But obviously in this case, they'd actually be overlooking their own garden if they put the wrong kind of development there. So they've got even more vested interest. But the planners will be looking out for that, irrespective of what you might say. Even if you said, actually, I don't care, the planners will still be looking out for future generations and future occupants of your house. So it's always important to avoid overlooking other people's houses and other people's gardens. Okay, this is a modest example. I've deliberately included examples which are modest. You'll see some even smaller ones in a second, as well as some big cases. This is a little infill site. If you look at the graphic, the plan, bottom right-hand side, you can see there's a house in slightly, it's the end terrace house there with the return hip. So end of terrace, again, nothing special. You can see it in the upper image as well in the CGI. But they have lots of side garden land as well as the land behind their house. So you can see there, we managed to get a very nice, high quality and contemporary, although very modest chalet type bungalow in there. But that makes a really nice family home, detached house, just on some side excess garden land. Waverley Avenue, this is in Minster. This is actually on what they call the island in the sun, the Isle of Sheppey in Kent. So you can see that, if you look at the plan of that on the bottom right-hand side, this Tween Hills was the house that had that garden. You see this Tween Hills had a huge garden to the north, garden to the south, garden off to the west, going right down to another road. So this is all part of the Tween Hills garden. And you can see in this case, we've managed to get a very nice, predominantly open plan, detached house on that garden. This is a good model, actually. Most houses that we do are either rectangular or square. Okay, it's pretty simple, guys. You'll see 2 or 3 other houses very, very similar to this. It's a very good model, and you can see what it's doing. If you look at the plans on the left-hand side, All the emphasis, like I was saying, for the windows is to the front and to the back, with only tiny, this is true of other houses as well next to you, but also your own house. You can see it's just got tiny little bathroom and toilet windows in the side elevations. Okay, All Saints. This is a bit different, a bit more exciting. And this was an end terrace. So you can see the building in white, number 66 it is. If you flip your head around, it's not 99, it's 66. Is the end terrace house, which you can also see in white on the CGI. End terrace house, very contemporary, well, 1960s type estate. So it's a 1960s estate. We didn't feel any obligation to have any kind of old-fashioned house on the end, which would have looked a bit weird in any case. So we went all out with a fully contemporary scheme. So you can see what we've done there. And again, a corner site. These corner sites are really useful. So you can see what we've done on that. We've deliberately got a brick flank wall downstairs to stop passers-by looking into your house or tapping on your window, causing general nuisance and social nuisance. And then the windows look out above on the upper floor. So quite an exciting 3-story house, including a little sort of zinc-clad pod on top for the master bedroom. Okay, really nice contemporary house. A lot of these were won at appeal, guys. A lot of these cases, they were refused by the council, then won at appeal. This is one that was won at appeal. Cliff Road, Folkestone, speak of the devil. This also was refused by the local council and approved by the appeal inspector. Okay, so you can see it's kind of behind the existing house. It's not excess side garden land, it is excess rear land, but there's an access down the way. You can see to the right-hand side of that blue shape, there's an existing access way there which serves garages and serves the back garden of the existing house. So the existing garden of the blue shaped house, the existing house, extended all the way to encompass this red shape as well. And that's one reason that the planners can be negative is they're very scared of you establishing negative precedents. Planning is very based on precedent, okay? So sometimes it's necessary to draw the distinction why your site should be developed, but the other sites in the street perhaps shouldn't be developed. And having that existing rear access was obviously one thing in the favour of this scheme. The local council obviously was still negative, notwithstanding that argument, but the government inspector said they were wrong and we were right, and the scheme should be approved, which it was. Okay, another squarish house. This is plan, the idea of having windows to the front and the rear. This also had the advantage of being a corner site. So you can see it's also got windows in the free right-hand side elevation. So this is a real good case for a modest scheme making hundreds of thousands of pounds. So this entire site was just excess side garden land of number 2, you can see, which was an end terrace. One other thing I would draw attention to on this, you can see we've got a blank wall facing our existing house, the previous house. We're also a long way from other houses. One other thing I'd draw your attention to, it is in London, okay? This is a London borough. So you can see the private garden at the top of the plan on the right-hand side. Some people might think that's a little bit of a weird shape and perhaps a little bit smaller than you might ideally like. And that's true. A lot of boroughs out in the sticks, in the countryside, in the home counties and beyond, other parts of England, would prefer you to have a nice rectangular 10-metre deep garden. The boroughs in London are a little bit more relaxed. So provided you exceed the space standards required for amenity under the London plan, they usually take a more relaxed attitude than boroughs would do out in the countryside. Great result, great result. And you can see it's almost finished now, almost at practical completion. Another squarish house, but you can see this one, these are all variations on a theme really. You can see this one, because of where it is and the way it sits with neighbours, has actually got blank walls in an L shape. So the right-hand side and the bottom of the page side are blank, and the windows are to the north and to the west. So again, you can see how this, I mean, this was just excess side garden land of the existing house well off to the left of the plan image on the left-hand side there. Huge garden. So you can see here we managed to park it up. We've basically got the house, you need enough room for a house and its garden and parking if they want off-street parking. Okay, and you can see here we've got ample space to achieve all of those things. So again, a lovely detached house in excess garden land with values, as I was saying, you know, and say this one is maybe 400, 450 residual land value, maybe 130. You're literally creating money out of thin air. This is a very, very modest example in Staplehurst, which is a village near Maidstone. You can see the house in the photograph, top left, excess side garden land towards that blue truck. So if you look at the plans, the beige tone showed what was there before. Okay, so that's what was there before. The pink, purpley pink color is everything that we're doing. Okay, so this is about to hit site, this one. It's been liaising with the client this week, actually. So you can see what we've done there. We've got planning approval from the council for another house alongside the existing house. Also at the same time, wrapped up into the same approval was a large rear extension. You can see behind the beige tone. So we did all that at the same time. And of course, when you hit site and start building this out, it makes sense to build that extension of the existing house while you've got a presence on site, because it's much cheaper to build while you already have a presence on site, especially where you can have contiguous footings and there's a contiguous party wall being created. Okay, it's cheaper to build both at once. And then, of course, we said in the bottom right-hand side there in the wording, you can see this presents our client with so many options. They can do whatever they want to. They can either hold both and rent them out. They can sell both of them if they want to, or they could hold one for rental and sell the other one, or vice versa. They could choose which one to sell and which one to hold. Okay, Sutton Road. This is in Maidstone. Okay, the guys had that big bungalow you can see in the image bottom left. Okay, you can see the bottom left, big bungalow, wide plot and deep plot and lots of outbuildings. That bungalow was so big that by clever use of Velux roof lights and large box rear dormers, we could carve that into two big houses. Okay, so it was a single-story bungalow. It's now two large two-story semi-detached houses. In addition to that, we built the house you can see in the CGI in the rear garden. Now it's a little bit weird, a little bit Kentish, and you can see it's got a crank shape to it, which is similar to the outbuildings you can see in the photographs. Okay, but basically you can see by doing that, quite simple, we've turned one property into three properties. So I've said there, it's like magic. Here's an example in Linstead, which is a village up near Sittingbourne, just south of Sittingbourne in Swale, which is basically Sittingbourne and Faversham and the villages around that area. You can see the house. If you look at the plan, top right, you can see the existing house towards the right-hand side. And we got planning for two nice, large detached houses in the garden. Okay, so while these houses look small on the plan, compared to the existing 1970s house, they are actually large, detached executive houses. So these are real schemes, guys. This is real money. We're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds uplift just on the land value, the uplift on the residual land value, without even building anything. Okay, another slightly larger example, Burnhurst. You can see the big old house, top left there. Had a very large garden, very, very large garden, almost like a deep paddock, really, out into the countryside. But you can see one advantage of this, I'm giving you the tips that you need to look out for the planning. You can see even that extended well back from the main road, which is on the top right-hand side. You can see development left and right, or to the north and south, had already extended well into that countryside as far as the tip of their garden. Okay, so this also effectively meant the entire thing was a legitimate infill site. So you can see there what we've done. We've retained the existing house, which is important. All these cases that I'm showing you retain the existing house. We're not demolishing anything, because some people lose hundreds of thousands of pounds before they even start. So they start off by demolishing what's already there. None of these cases do that. The existing house is still there on the right-hand side. The previous owner still lives there. He wanted to stay there. You see its garden is huge still. These new builds also have huge gardens. Okay, so that's a great example of infill. And then you can see what we've also done is our proposed new houses have blank walls facing north and south. So you can see the estate houses, north and south of our site. We're not overlooking any of them. We're not overlooking the gardens to the north, and we're not overlooking the gardens to the south. Okay, this is the last one for today, guys. And this is one I always allude to, doing a block of flats in a garden. Okay, so why did this get approved by the planners? A couple of reasons, well, at least a couple of reasons. Basically, if you look at the plan, bottom right-hand side, this was excess side garden land of a very, very modest 3-bed end of terrace. Okay, so you see the dark tone there on the right-hand side. That's a long terrace of very modest houses. You can also see it in the blue tone on the CGI at the top. Excess garden land well beyond what they needed, or anybody could reasonably need. There's plenty of land in front of that house, and even more land behind it for its rear garden. Doesn't need this excess side garden land. What else? What's the other planning trick that meant this could go through? It's also very close to the town centre. Okay, so if you're in a fringe town centre site, it's better because it's a sustainable location. People can walk to the shops. What's another reason? You see on the left of our proposal, there's an even bigger chunk of building. That's a big old pub, okay, which is bigger than our building. Now, here's a trick. This was approved by the local council. This didn't have to go to appeal or anything. If you look at the CGI on the bottom left, you can see that's what we were originally proposing. We wanted to be a little bit in your face, contemporary, all in brick, and grouping the two large picture windows there. You see, basically it's a 3-story block of flats. But the planners weren't quite so keen on that. So the approved scheme is what you can see in the upper CGI image. So you can see what we've done there. We've only taken the brick. It's picking up exactly on the cues provided by the context. So you see the brick stops at the eaves height of the adjacent pub. So it fits in better. So you can see where the planners were coming from. It fits in better. And then the top story flat is all just clad in zinc, which is a very modern but a very established material. We do love zinc. It looks contemporary, but it's been around for hundreds of years and proven itself. Most of Paris is clad in zinc. It's mansard stories and roofs, for example. So that instantly, perhaps because it looks like a dark grey, like a bit like an English or Welsh slate, should we say, it has more connotations of being a roofing material. So it looks more legitimately like a roof. Okay, so that's a block of flats in a side garden of a very modest house. Okay, guys, well, I hope you found that interesting. I promised I'd tell you all about it. I promised I'd say the do's and don'ts and the question and answer bit at the beginning. I hope you enjoyed those questions and you acknowledge the answers to all those questions. There are no questions that are insurmountable. We answered all those questions. And also, as promised, I've shown you lots and lots of examples. Okay, cheers, guys. Bye.